Hey everyone, welcome back to Tallulah Talks. That is me. So today is not Saturday, you will notice it is Sunday. I was working yesterday, so I didn't have time to film, edit, upload, etc. etc. So it is Sunday this week. Um so which means it is the haunting hour. And today I am going to be talking about Alcatraz prison. I always keep wanting to say Azkaban, but then I remember that Azkaban is fictional. So yeah. You'll also notice that I'm not wearing makeup. I just couldn't be bothered doing my makeup today, so I look like this. Sexy, I know. So, book of stories. And yeah, we're looking into the ghosts of Alcatraz. So this was a place where obviously prisons aren't meant to be pleasant and they're there for punishment. So it was said that, especially in Alcatraz, because it was such a strict, horrible prison to be in, the prisoners within this prison did experience very emotional extremes, so like really high emotions, extremely low emotions, and the on-site executions, which happened often, were the kind of perfect environment to create spirits. So, first off, we're going to start with the history of Alcatraz prison. It became a federal prison in 1934 with James Johnston as the warden until its closing in 1963. It didn't say why the prison closed. That there was no information when I was doing my research. It could just be the way the prison was run. The inmates found that the prison was a place with very little rights, and that's kind of the usual in prisons, unfortunately, because the inmates are there to be punished, but at the same time they're still human. You know, they still have some kind of rights. They basically got their basics. They got their basic 3 meals a day, their prison attire, a private cell, a little shower within their cell, and access to a doctor. So moving on to kind of like the ghostly activity, because like I said, it was a place where a lot of executions took place. A number of the guards that worked in the prison from 1946 and between 1946 and 1963 experienced a lot of strange occurrences. They would hear inmates sobbing and moaning, and they would smell really strange odours, and throughout the prison they would always feel like cold spots. But there were certain places in the prison where this would take place. Many also saw apparitions, which they then later described as spirits, because they would have had a roster for all the prisoners. And when the prison kind of became like a tourist site, I think it still is. I think you can still go up and visit the prison and go through the prison. But families living on the island, so I'll show you photos of Alcatraz, and it is on like a small island. Guests claim to see the ghostly figures of past prisoners. They would hear sounds of like gunshots, and this actually made the guards think the prisoners had escaped and taken weapons, but upon further inspection, this wasn't the case. There was a deserted laundry room, like no one used it, and it would smell of smoke. And not only that, but they would actually physically see smoke as if the place was on fire. And so this would then send the guards running out to maybe like evacuate the prison. But upon returning, it was found that the air was completely clear and there was no explanation for this. It was also widely reported that the warden, obviously throughout the whole opening and closing of the prison, didn't believe in spirits, but he did have experiences of hearing people sobbing when he would lead tour groups around the prison. So I think this would have been when the prison closed, but it wouldn't. There was never actually any information. These sounds were often followed by what was described as an ice cold wind, which was felt by the entire tour group when they were with the warden. It was also felt by the warden as well. During the 29 years that the prison operated as a prison, there were 14 escape attempts which either resulted in death or recapture of the inmates. The most violent one was nicknamed the Battle of Alcatraz, and that happened in May of 1946. And this is where a lot of people who worked there believed that the spirits had come from. 6 inmates were involved and believed that they had this foolproof plan of escaping. However, during the escape attempt, they soon realised that there was no way they were going to make it out. And so they decided to fight back and take guards as hostages. They killed 3 of the hostages, so 3 of the guards, and wounded many others, and 2 of the hostages were actually murdered in cell 402 and 403, but I think the cells were then changed names, and they're meant to be like that's where the most activity is meant to be. 3 escapees also died by shooting, so there was obviously some sort of shootout, and it was like stray bullets that had hit them and killed them. In 1972, this was when Alcatraz was opened to the public as part of the National Park Service. Many night guards state that they heard sounds of running up and down the corridors, and when they went to further investigate, there was no one there, but then when they went back to like their previous post, it would continue. One guard also reports that on a slow day, so there weren't many tours that day, she went to block A, which would lead to like the old dungeons, and heard a very loud scream at the bottom of the stairs. And many have actually reported having strange feelings in the cell 14D. So in this cell, it was described as always cold, and many have actually also described what they described as terrifying instances within cell 14D. During one guard shift within the 1940s, an inmate was locked up in that cell. We're not entirely sure why he was put in that cell. He was just there, and the guard was obviously there taking up duty. And the man within like minutes began screaming hysterically at being locked. So this was like literally minutes within being locked in, he went off his head, started screaming hysterically, and claimed that a creature with glowing eyes like was in there with him. Nobody took this seriously. They had all heard the stories, but you know, they probably felt that he just wanted to get out, because the guards would actually play jokes on each other of seeing spirits. So this was like a common thing to do, and so this is what the guard believed the prisoner was doing. This continued throughout the night, but then all of a sudden it just stopped, and like just stopped, nothing. And you would think the guard would check on him to see if he was okay, but again, this prison was like, I think it was pretty notorious for being a really shitty place. The following day, the guards then checked the cell and found the inmate dead. There was said to be a really horrible expression on his face, and there was hand marks on his throat, and there was like no way that he could have done this himself. The autopsy showed that the inmate died of strangulation, but like I said, there was no way it could have been self-inflicted. And the day after the body was found, the guards were doing a lineup to count all the prisoners, and like they had counted too many heads. And basically, what had happened was at the end of the line, a lot of the guards claimed to have seen this dead inmate, and then when they went to recount, he was just gone. So moving forward, and when Alcatraz was kind of open to the public, visitors into Alcatraz follow basically like the same routes that the inmates did when they had initially come to the prison to do their time. So they entered the main cell house, and once inside, just past block C was a metal door which you could see had once been welded shut. Tour guides never usually mention the door. I'm not sure why. But behind it is where the 3 escapees from the Battle of Alcatraz back in 1946 were killed. So it's maybe that there's maybe just a lot of activity behind that door. 30 years after that incident, a night guard began hearing clanging sounds. Like it sounded like someone was like bashing on the pipes. And this was beyond this welded door. So he opened the door, he used a torch to see what was making the noise, and he saw and heard nothing. But then when he closed the door, the noises began again. There was also, so again, when it was open to the public in 2005, a team of investigators wanted to go to the prison to see like what footage they could capture, basically. So they went to this, what was known as like the Rose Garden, and this was also a part of the prison that was known to be quite haunted. And one of the team members of this investigation team, Dan, got a headache, and the longer they stayed in the garden, the worse it got. So at this time, another team member, Kelly, took photos of Dan and could see like 2 orbs very near him, and the worse his headache got, the brighter the orbs got. But as soon as he was out the garden, headache was just gone. They also entered cell house 3, which was built in 1899. And as soon as they entered this cell, they heard what sounded like someone was clanging the pipes. So, and like the entire team heard this, but no one was working in the building that night. So they then moved to a part of the prison that no one had been in many years, including employees. And I think this is where like previous riots had taken place. Graffiti was scrawled all over the walls. There were scorch marks of a fire that had happened back in 1973. A team member noticed a picture of 3 men in prison garment on the back wall, and she tried to reach these pictures, but she wasn't quite tall enough, her arm wasn't quite long enough to reach the pictures. But going along all the cells, they found a lot of pictures very similar to this. And again, she attempted to get this picture, but while she did this, she felt someone reach out and run their fingers through her hair. The cell was locked and empty, but the team member actually described it as quite a gentle touch. She didn't feel like it was sinister in any way. And that is the haunting of Alcatraz prison. So it's not surprising that there's been known to be a lot of activity in the prison, because there were a lot of violent deaths, especially when prisoners were trying to escape. And it obviously just wasn't a great place to live. And it kind of seems like the prison was haunted before it had even become a prison. Like I said, some of the cells were built back in like the very late 1800s. So it could have been that something was maybe left behind from that time. I hope you've enjoyed today's story. I definitely enjoyed researching it, because I love just looking into the true events of things and the hauntings of different buildings, the stories behind these hauntings. And yeah, so if you enjoy this type of content, definitely hit that subscribe button. And if you have any stories for me in regards to hauntings, or even in regards to the murderers for my Killer Wednesday videos, leave it in the comments and I will definitely do my research.